point in the service, we usually just have a little focus on what's going on around the church and in the community at the moment. You'll see perhaps on some of the seats, you might have to just look a few away to see the joining in leaflet. Please take that with you. Have a read of it during the evening. Look at all of those different opportunities for things that you can get involved in. Sunday evenings are lovely because we're quite small, we're quite intimate, we can get to know each other quite well. We'll encourage you to stay for tea and coffee and just have a chat to get to know each other. But in a big church community, it's really important that we find our place, that we find that sense of belonging. So there's lots of things going on that potentially you can get involved with during the week, and have a little look through that. Look at things like the discipleships groups. They're fantastic. They're really good opportunities to just bring together people to support you in your journey, to walk with you, that you can feel open with, that you can share with, and lots of other things as well. So if you like the really active stuff, like getting involved in netball or table tennis, or I like the term serious cycling and serious walking. So just emphasising that, what you're letting yourself in for. But do have a look at that, because there's some things that I'm sure will appeal to you. There's lots of things going on as well in the Saturdays in May that I thought I'd just emphasise. So there's potentially something, particularly if you're a lady, that's going on every Saturday in May. So first of all, there's the 7th of May. There's a prophetic day conference here where we're being joined by somebody recognised as one of the National Council of Prophets. And that sounds like a really exciting opportunity to learn how to hear from God, to learn what he might be saying to you individually and to us as a church. So you do need to sign up for event on Eventbrite for that. It's a whole day from 10 till 4. I think all the lunches have gone, so you'll have to bring a packed lunch, or think about some things to sustain you and keep you going. If the sessions themselves don't do that, which I think they may well do. So the 14th of May, so this is for ladies. They're restarting the ladies' women's breakfast in the morning, so 8:30 for an hour and a half. No sign-up essential for that, but put that in your diary as an opportunity to get together with some other women. And again, for the ladies, so the ladies are getting all of the opportunities. The 21st of May, a women's prayer day, so away from the church at Capel St Mary, and that's an Eventbrite sign up as well from 10 till 4. So if you'd like to know a bit more about the prayer day, either talk to myself or to Margaret, who's going to be speaking to us later, because we're involved in the setting up of that. So lots of things that you can potentially get involved in. Okay, so I'm going to invite Margaret to come up and share with us. So really interested to hear what you're going to talk to us about. Does age matter? It sounds like the title of a sort of TV sort of series or something like that. So I'd just like to pray for Margaret, and then I'll give you the microphone. Thank you, God, for Margaret. Thank you for the way that you've inspired her over the last days and weeks about what she should bring to us and speak to us about this evening. And I just pray that you'll open our eyes and our hearts and our ears to be able to hear from you, and that we'll all take something away that will change us, that will draw us closer to you in our relationship with you. And just pray that the words that Margaret speaks will really resonate with us this evening, Lord. Amen.
Thanks, Alice. So this is number one in a very short series of two evenings that we're going to do, as Alice said earlier, on the theme of Does Age Matter? So I'm kicking it off tonight. You can guess which end of the age range I'll be doing. Next week will be the perfectly marvellous Arian, who will be doing something else. I forget what his title is, but between the two of us, this week and next week, we're looking at Does Age Matter? Now, my title tonight, under Does Age Matter, is Sarah, Mother at an Older Age. Again, I will leave you to guess why that is, why I'm doing that. So, this starts in Genesis 11 and goes through really till Genesis 21. So I'm not going to do an awful lot of referencing through this, because it just kind of, it all gets a bit messy. So unlike me, because I love my Bible references, I'm not going to do too much of that tonight. But we're going to look at Sarah's life. When we're first introduced to Sarah in Genesis 11, well, it's actually probably the end of Genesis 10, she is not Sarah, she is Sarai. And she's not married to Abraham, she's married to Abram, because this goes back to the time before God changed their names, that amazing intervention of God where he changed both their names symbolically to say about them both and to them both that he was doing a new thing in their lives. They had no idea of the scale of the work he was doing. But when we first meet Sarai, she is living in a place called a big city which is at the southern end of the Euphrates, not too far from the Persian Gulf. That was where of the Chaldeans, the Chaldean people, was located. So she was there with Abram, her husband, his father, Terah, who as head of the family decided, for reasons we're not told, to leave there and go to the land of Canaan, which involved a long journey north up the route of the Euphrates, and then they did a kind of horseshoe over the top to get down into Canaan. They actually got so far, they got to a place called Haran, and then Terah seemed to decide to stay there. So their journey to Canaan was interrupted. They set out for Canaan. They didn't get there at first, but that's coming. Back to Sarai, the first thing we know of her is that she is barren. And that is a big thing if you were a woman in the ancient Middle East, in many cultures, in fact, across the world. Your role as a woman, as a married woman, was, first you became a wife, and basically 9 months later you become a mother, or else something's wrong. And if that didn't happen, there was an assumption that there was something seriously wrong, and it was not particularly the physical. It was seen many times as a kind of a judgment from God. It must have been really awful for her, because she went many years before she ever had a child. But Sarai had no idea of her destiny. She had an amazing destiny. She just didn't know it at that stage. And she was one of 3 very interesting barren mothers. I love the concept of the barren mother. There was Sarai, there was her daughter-in-law, Rebecca, and then her granddaughter, Rachel. And they were all described as barren. There was another very significant barren mother, and that was Hannah, who became the mother of the prophet Samuel. And these barren mothers, amazingly, all gave birth to very significant offspring. So Sarai's life at this stage was not without adventure. She goes on this massive journey with her husband's family, and there was this interruption. But then, at a certain point, God comes and he speaks to Abram. His dad had died by now. And after his dad died, God said to Abram, take your wife and your nephew, Lot, and carry on this journey. Go to the land of Canaan. I want you to go there. And God made him a massive promise. He said he would make Abram into a great nation, and that he would give the land of Canaan, to Abram's offspring. At this point, there was no mention of Sarai, what her role was in this. God is speaking to Abram about his offspring, but there's an obvious problem. His wife is barren. How's that going to happen? So Sarai is very much in waiting at this stage. She has no child, and she's having to endure who knows what by way of taunting or people whispering behind their hand. She must have felt terrible. She must have gone through terrible shame, because in that culture, it was seen very negatively to be a wife and yet not to be a mother. So Sarai does the thing that many of us will do in periods of prolonged waiting. She gets under frustration. Sarah has no child, but what she does have is a maidservant, a slave, called Hagar. And within their culture, it was reasonably common that if a slave woman became the wife of the master and had a child by him, that child would be reckoned as the master's wife's child. So she sees a way to kind of make this thing happen. Trying to make things happen is always a dodgy one. When God is on the job, don't try and make it happen. Let God do it. But impatience got to her, and she went for this second best solution. She believed that God was withholding something from her. She says at one point, "The Lord has kept me from bearing children." And this was her reasoning behind giving Hagar to Abram as a second wife. And of course, it did work out the way she imagined it would. Hagar got pregnant. She bore a son to Isaac. Sorry, she bore a son to Abram. But it wasn't the way God was going to do it. And it turned out not to be the solution that she hoped for. This is very much like, at a very much earlier time, Eve thought the same thing. Eve in Eden thought that God was withholding something from her. And in her case, it was the wisdom to be like God. This is what the enemy tempted Eve with, and she fell for it. And she also did not get the solution she imagined she would get. In fact, her solution was terrible and disastrous for all the generations after her, until Jesus came and redeemed the situation. But Sarai did not understand that this was a matter of God's timing and not of God's withholding. She thought God had kept her from bearing children. He was withholding something that she felt she had a right to. And it was a very reasonable thing to want. She was a wife. She wanted a baby. Of course she did. But she couldn't understand what was happening at this time in her life. And it took 14 more years of waiting. That is a very long time to be waiting for something as big in her life as this was. Abram, by this time 99 years old, which makes Sarai 89 years old. She was 10 years younger than him. At 99, Abram has another in a series of encounters with God. And this was the time that God came to Abram and gave them these changes of their names. Abram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. And when God changed their names, this is when he finally identifies Sarah as the mother of the promised child. And it's all about the timing. God is very specific that when he says that Sarah will be the mother of this child, and he emphasizes it really strongly because they're finding this very difficult to believe by now. They've almost lost hope. So God reiterates it quite a few times that the son will be born to Sarah, not to someone else. She's still skeptical, but God even gives them now the timing. He says, about this time next year, I will come to you again, and Sarah will have a son. I think right up to the wire, she's still skeptical. She's still finding it difficult to believe, almost like it's too good to be true. When you've waited for something so important for so long, it's really hard to not feel that you don't want to get your hopes up in case they're dashed again, and you don't want to go through the disappointment. She didn't quite dare to believe it. And right through until chapter 21, and we're in chapter 17 when God does the name changing, right through to chapter 21, finally she says, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. She was 90 when she had Isaac, and she lived until she was 127. So Isaac would have been 37 before she died. She had 37, hopefully good years with her son. She raised him, she saw him grow up to manhood, and she had her fulfillment. But it was a long journey to get there. So what of being a mother at an older age? I really can't compare with Sarah, not remotely. But I was a mother for the third time on my very last day of being 40. The following day, I turned 41. So it was quite late. Even when I was very late, 31, when we had our oldest, Ruth, the medics were saying to me, ooh, 31, it's a little bit late for a first. We kind of, it's best if you can have your first round about 25, 26. I thought, 25, 26, I wasn't even married then. And at 25, 26, I was not ready. I really was not ready to have a child then. The timing is really important. Timing is important. In the way God works things out, the timing is critical. And sometimes you have to wait, and you have to trust, and you have to try not to give in to the frustration, as hard as it is. But God will work it out. I think that I didn't have anything like the drama that Sarai had. When we decided to start a family, it was all very smooth, praise God. There wasn't a lot of drama. Even when we had another babe, when I was on my last day of being 40, there were advantages. There were advantages, definitely. I had an 8 and a 10-year-old who were very keen to help mummy. Really did make a difference in little practical things. So I can't at all quite imagine how bad things may have got for Sarah, but they would have been bad. And for her to be able to hold that child in her arms finally, even after making all her mistakes with getting the timing wrong, trying to push, because she knew God had said that Abraham would have a child, would have a son. She wanted to push it. Human nature, isn't it? We don't wait well. However, we can all identify with the waiting. This whole thing about waiting. We all have to wait at times. And if Sarah's story teaches us anything, it's the importance of patience, of trust, of obedience. Bernie often says God is more concerned with fulfilling his word than necessarily the time it takes. And that's absolutely true. But what do you do in the wait? What happens in the waiting? The waiting is not supposed to be an empty time where nothing is happening. And if we look at it, if we approach it the right way, it doesn't need to be that. It's an opportunity, strange as that may seem, but it is an opportunity, if you respond properly, to build faith, to thank God ahead of time for the solution that is coming in his timing. It's just that we can't see his timing. And I think Sarah's story teaches us something really crucial about this business of waiting, especially when you wait a long time for something. God was working in the background of her life, but she didn't know that. She didn't know what he was doing. He had to get a lot of things in place because what he was doing with them as a couple was immense. These were going to be the founders of God's chosen nation. And God had spoken to Abraham about that. He probably didn't appreciate the implications. He just knew something great was going to happen. But probably he didn't really grasp it until much later. So we have to thank God for the fulfillment sometimes before we can actually see it. You pray in the wait, and that develops your relationship with God, and you grow in maturity. There is a lot to be done in the wait. It's very hard, but the Psalms are really good about speaking into this. One of the Psalms talks about those who pass through the valley of Baca, make it a place of springs. Baca was a valley that was probably it may have been a real valley, it may have been a symbolic thing, but it speaks of dryness, of barrenness, of lack of ease, lack of water. And it says that of the pilgrims going up to worship at the temple, it kind of speaks of them passing through this valley of Baca, this dry place, and they make it a place of springs. Everybody will have a Baca at some point. It can either be a place of barrenness and wilderness and dryness, or you can choose to make it a place of springs. And it goes on to say, they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. It's Psalm 84, 6-7. I've heard Neil say a good few times, never waste a good crisis. I would also say never waste a good wait. There are things to be gained in the wait. There are things to be learned in the wait. There are things to be developed in the wait. There's a lot to do in the wait. You have to trust and know that God is in charge of the timing, whatever it is you're waiting for. And there are promises in the wait. Psalm 126, verse 6, talks about those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. And the one who does that will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with him. Those who sow in tears. There was a time in my life, a good number of years ago, when I was going through an experience like that. And very late in that process, I read that verse and I thought, what have I been sowing in this time? What have I been sowing? What have I been seeding into the bedrock of my life? I hope I've been sowing some things, because if I do, I will come out of this with songs of joy, carrying sheaves. We are birthing things in the Spirit all through our lives. And age is no barrier to this. Those who sow in tears, if it has to be in tears, then that's how it has to be. But whether it's in tears or not, make sure you sow. Make sure you sow stuff. Because if you do, the promise is you're going to come out of it carrying sheaves and singing songs of joy. There are things to be gained in the wait. When I was approaching retirement, there were several people at work who said to me at different times, "Are you looking forward to retirement and being able to take it easy, slowing down?" And I used to kind of stifle a giggle and think, slowing down, are you kidding? This is my opportunity to power up. And I've been looking for that for years. I thought the day I get free from the routine of regular work, not that there's anything wrong with regular work. I'm a great believer that a job is a blessing from God, and we're supposed to work. But I was after powering up, not sinking back into the armchair with a bag of crisps watching the telly. That's really not what I ever wanted. So I was about to have my freedom to power up, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I used to see, when I was a child, I used to see elderly ladies, and there were one or two that even as a child made me think, you are old before your time. You are old and you don't need to be. But you've settled for a mentality that thinks, I've reached a certain age, this is how I'm supposed to be. I can't do the things I used to do. I need to slow down. I need to stop doing this. I need to start doing this. No, I'm not having that. That's just not what I ever wanted. And this was when I was just a kid, and I thought, I don't ever want to be like that. And I read the story of Caleb, bless him. Caleb, 80 years old, 85 years old, Bernie's favourite Bible character. 85 years old, and he'd gone through the whole process of bringing the Israelites into the promised land, seeing them all settled in their allotted lands. And when he'd done all that, he went back to his great friend Joshua, who was now leader of the nation, and he said, I've done everything you asked me to do, everything the Lord asked me to do. Now, give me those mountains. That was his allotment of land. And there were Amalekites or somebody in those mountains. He just wanted to go out and get them. This was his land, and he knew it was, and he meant to have it. 85 years old, he was still going strong. He was powering up. And that's what we can do with a weight. There is a lead time to any birth, whether it's a physical birth or something spiritual. And the lead times come in different lengths, and you may never know how long it's going to be. But what you can do is know that God is behind it and that God is controlling the timings. What matters for you in the wait is what you believe about your capability, your value, your potential. These things, I believe, are highly determining factors because our belief governs our behavior. If you believe that your situation is hopeless, that is going to really drag you down. And that's going to drag you to a place you're not going to want to be. But if, like Caleb did, you keep going, keep trusting God, keep knowing that his promise is sure, God is going to get you all through the timing and bring you to the place that you set out to go to. Does age matter? I don't believe so. Not negatively, anyway. Age has some advantages. It gives you an experience that the younger people don't have. But negatively, no. Age is not a barrier to powering up. It's not a barrier to growth. It's not a barrier to going out and getting the things that God has for you. Aspiration matters. Determination matters. Endurance matters. Obedience matters. Faithfulness matters. Faith matters. Philippians 3, verse 14. Pressing onwards towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenwards in Christ Jesus. That matters. Don't let anybody rob you of your destiny in God.
Thank you, Margaret. Let's just respond to that as we worship. Thanks, Joe.